Welcome to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast where we explore public sector leadership journeys. From honest chats about career highs and lows, to lessons and wisdom to inspire the next generation of leaders that will shape our society.
Hello and welcome to the Morgan Hunt Inspiring Working Lives podcast. Today's guest is Gerry McDonald, CBE. He is the Group Principal and Chief Executive Officer of New City College, NCC, leading the institution since 2013. Under his leadership, NCC has grown through 6 mergers to become one of the largest FE providers in East London and Essex, educating nearly 20,000 learners. A business studies teacher since 1993, Gerry holds degrees from the University of West of England and Aston University and a PGCE from Manchester Metropolitan University. He continues to teach business A-level and BTEC, keeping strategy closely linked to the classroom. He plays a key role in sector leadership as Deputy Chair of the Education and Training Foundation, a board member of the Association of Colleges. In 2025, he was recognised with a CBE for services to further education. He was appointed National Leader in Further Education in the same year. NCC achieved an outstanding Ofsted rating. Gerry, we are delighted to welcome you here to Morgan Hunt. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for asking me that. It's good to be here.
Superb. Right, we're really interested in your story, but I'd like to take you back to your childhood. Where did it begin, and did you have sort of career aspirations as a child?
Probably unrealistic. I guess for a child of the 60s and 70s, it was all about flying to the moon or playing football for England. I think at that time, as probably every other young kid wanted to do at that time. So yeah, I brought up in Bristol, which is a town I'm still very fond of. Very ordinary working class background. My dad sold cables for a large cable company, which was very interesting if you like that sort of thing, because you'd be walking along the street and they'd say, that's a copper whatever, and that's a fibre optics, and that's the future, son. So you had all that stuff, which was interesting if you like that. And my mum was what we now call an early years practitioner, was called a nursery nurse then, ran her own nurseries and stuff like that. But what I think I got from them was an absolutely huge work ethic. They never became senior in what they did, but what they did it with passion, and they did it with commitment. They did it with huge enthusiasm, and I think that sort of rubbed off. The thing I always like to say is, I'm not sure where it's true, but I'll say this anyway. My dad's possibly the oldest person to be furloughed in the UK. He was furloughed at 84. Yeah, and then retired after COVID. And I said, "Why are you still working?" He said, "Well, no one told me to stop, son." So he just kept going. He died last year. He was and he had that great death certificate, if you can ever have that, which is died of old age. So he lived a good life and was quite an inspiration to me. But I think, in terms of what did I want to do when I was young, I think it was I was probably as unclear as most kids are growing up. But it's that sense that whatever I do, I think you've got to commit to it, and you've got to say, yeah, if I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And that's really what I got from my childhood.
Wonderful. Okay. So how was education shaping your life at this stage?
Well, I probably wouldn't have enrolled myself, I think would probably be the answer.
Right.
So, yeah, I cruised through sort of primary and I thought secondary. I found it's all quite straightforward. And of course, you can date stamp people by the answers they give you, can't you? So I did my O-levels. Yeah. Younger listeners can look those up. But and did inexplicably badly, and I thought, how have I messed this up? Probably because I wasn't paying much attention and didn't really get the whole, how important it was. And so I went to the other side of Bristol to a Catholic sixth form college and managed to talk them into letting me do A-levels and retake my English at the same time. How I felt, I don't know. Sorted out a year later, but whether we do that, whether I would do that to my younger self now, I don't know. But I think it was a huge wake up for me of saying, to my 16-year-old, don't put yourself in that position again. I actually still don't think we got that right. I still think we put way too much pressure on young people. Clearly the pressure wasn't on me because I didn't put enough effort into it. But I think there's that sense of, and I've said this to people, all the students really have gone through, which is not, it'll feel like it's defining your life, but it really, really, really isn't. No. And you've just got to take it as a step in your journey. So I think that's the important thing for me about education, is that it's an enabler, it's an incredibly important part of our journey as we're growing up. But whatever those educational outcomes are at any particular point in time, they don't define who you are. Yes. And I think that we have got the messaging around that not quite right. And so I've always talked to our students about saying, it's usually important and put the effort into it, but there's always options. There's always choices you'll have, whatever the outcome is.
Yes. As recruiters, it's amazing how little time hiring managers look at qualifications. It's about what have they done, what can they do here, tell me about that individual.
And I think that's about the balance, isn't it? And I think there's one of the things that we definitely try and do that in New City, which is to say, you're going to need to tell employers a bigger story than just your qualifications.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one, if I can say this now, one of the things which has disappointed me in the time I've been involved in the FE sector, which I think is about 1 million years, is I don't think we certainly don't have enough funding for enrichment. We do a good job on enrichment, all colleges do a good job on it. We could do so much more. And I think trying to get students to be involved in other things, I think is hard. I think there's a social mobility angle to that too.
Yeah.
Because clearly it's much easier if you've got parents who can enable those sorts of choices and don't require you to work and add to family income. But that's not always the case for all students. So I think we really need to, it's interesting to hear you say that actually, because if employers are looking for a broader set of things from people, we need to facilitate that more in the educational system. And I don't think we do enough of that. So.
Yeah, I think that's been a common theme in some of the conversations we've had recently is, are we building a youth ready for the workplace of the future?
I always think we do the very best we possibly can.
Yeah.
I think we do the very best we possibly can. I think there's a little bit more in the ask of employers. I think it's got harder.
Yeah.
I think it's got harder. We were discussing just before we started about more organisations being hybrid. That makes getting work experience really difficult, actually. And I think sometimes employers will understandably say, look, we're not seeing the soft skills, we're not seeing the full package. And I think our gentle pushback to that is, but you've got to help us.
Yes.
We need to do that as a joint endeavour.
Yeah.
We're going to need you to say, look, we don't feel this is being developed enough in college, but actually we can help you too.
Yeah.
So I think if you come in from that approach, rather than just saying, well, we expect a fully formed individual at 16, 17, 18 or later in their career, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So I think it has to be, a joint endeavour, as I say.
Got it. Good. Okay, so going back to your own education then, what happened after sixth form?
I did a degree in business at what was Bristol Polytechnic, another age stamp. Now University of West. I really enjoyed it. It was in those days it was called a sandwich degree, so there were two proper, really good work experiences. I loved it. It was very, very interesting for me. And then I had a very interesting couple of career. I'm not going to call them 4 stars, different experiences. One was I tried being a stockbroker.
Right.
So if you want to be a stockbroker, you really got to come to London. So I did it in Bristol. And I think I knew that was not for me when I was on a dredger in the Bristol Channel. I'll explain that story. So I was an analyst, a junior analyst, writing about companies and what they were doing. And I got British dredging, which was like, I think it's the one they always gave to the trainee, which is all they did was take sand off the bottom of the channel and sell it. So there was nothing much to say about them really, and I thought this is an interesting career, perhaps not for me. So I then went and worked for a large food manufacturer, very well-known food manufacturer in London, and I think and that was great because London in the 80s was a great place to be. I think the challenge was, for me, it felt very impersonal. It was an absolutely huge organisation, and I think that's difficult actually, and I think it's interesting for younger people because they all just feel that your career journey must have been perfect at every step, and mine certainly wasn't. And I had 2 careers in 2 years that didn't quite work the way I wanted them to. Partly that, looking back, it was the 22-year-old me a bit impatient. Well, of course it was. You know, and I think we probably still see some of that now, don't we? That people expect their career to be working out every step of the way. But I didn't see it. I thought, you know, it's not working for me. I'll do something else. So I travelled. I went to South America for 3 months and loved that and did that. And then came back and I thought, right, what are you going to do now? And I had no idea. So I was still on that sort of, okay, I'm not really sure. And so because I then managed to coincide that with the start of the early 90s recession, it just suddenly works a bit trickier. And so I just did some tutoring. And I think that was probably the tiniest then bit of something that got me into thinking about teaching. So there was no big, you know, moment when I thought, I want to be a teacher. It was just sort of, oh, okay, this is quite interesting. And I just did a little bit of local tutoring and I really enjoyed it. And I think there's a little bit of something there. It's a lot harder to get a job now than it was 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe I should pursue that. So I went to Crewe, as you do, which is now part of Manchester Metropolitan University. And had a very interesting year. A very interesting year. Do my PGCE. But my PGCE is like 11 plus, so I could have taught in a secondary school. It just so happened that I got interviewed in a sixth form college. So again, it was a bit of an accident, really. I ended up in FE back at, and I came into FE at the point of incorporation. So I've sort of gone through that whole journey since '93. And I think that's been quite an interesting sort of journey. So, you know, I've jumped from education straight to employment there, Dan, but...
Right, no, that's great. It's great to hear that. You can feel this hook coming to get you, which is further education, etc. What kind of lit you up about further education where the other roles didn't?
I think it was, for me, still young, still a young teacher in my sort of mid to late 20s. You're seeing people who, I think you really realise that you can make a difference to them. You really understand that there's a. I was in Birmingham now, so this is a really dynamic, interesting, quite. I don't like the word deprived, but you know, for shorthand, challenging community. And you know that college is, we would now call it an anchor institution because that's sort of what it was. And I think that at that time, I would just say now too, but Effie was trying to find, you know, its mission post-incorporation, what are we here for, how do we shape up this new set of responsibilities we've got because we're no longer part of the local authority, there's a different type of dynamic here. So it was a really exciting time to join a college. The college I was in, although it was a sixth form college, it was very much not traditional. So it was interested in exploring other things that it could do for its community. So we started to pilot some adult courses. At a time, the sixth form college didn't do that at all. We did some pretty big European contracts. So there was always something else you could get involved in. There was always something else that people said, well, we've got some new project, or how do you fancy teaching adults? How do you fancy doing this? So nothing was this, you know, year to year it changed. And I think that was a really interesting experience for me. And I think that you get guided then by certain key individuals who sort of, actually, do you want to try this? And I think that keeps you quite lively, doesn't it? When you can see an organisation that's developing at the same time as your career is taking off. You know, this is... So I stopped moving at that point. I thought, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay in FE because it worked for me.
Got it, yeah. And it's great to make that link between, it's not just about educating teenagers in terms of getting qualifications, this whole community aspect of FE, which is when that clicks, it's really powerful.
Yeah, and I still think, even all these years later, we're misunderstood on how much we bring to adult education, hugely. And it makes me quite, you know, I think disheartened sometimes because you look and see about the disinvestment in adult education that's happened, especially in the last 10 years, but over that whole time, when it was far more normal for adults to go back to college. It wasn't just a thing you did between 16 and 18, you'd go back and you'd refresh your career and you'd get topped up with your next set of professional qualifications. And, you know, we still do vast amounts of that. But it's on a smaller scale than it was a while ago. And I think that we don't value it in the way that we should do. And I think that particularly now, particularly when you're looking at, not just social mission, not just community cohesion. My college does a very large amount of ESOL, and that's massively important to our communities. And I think that's a market which is often not given enough attention and becomes too political. More than that later. But I think the other thing that's massively undervalued is how FE is really nimble and quick about getting people into work. Certainly an interesting story, well, I find quite an interesting story about that. So we've got a really nice relationship with an organisation called Kenson who do all the groundwork stuff.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant because we've got some spare land in our Raynham campus, and they're constantly digging it up and relaying it. I feel like some nightmare street you'd never want to live on, because they just keep relaying the payment. Basically what they're doing is they're giving you, where do you learn to do that if you can't do it on a dummy site? So give them a bit of land, they work with other people, they're getting into work in 2 months.
Wow.
And colleges do that stuff, as opposed to, well, come and train for 3 years and we'll see whether you'll. And I think we need to think about quick routes in, which FE is really, really good at. So, right now, when my colleagues are thinking, where is it, because it's enrolment, our construction courses are all full up.
Yeah.
As they will be in probably just about every college in the country. We've just been awarded the Construction Technical Excellence College, which is a great thing. It's a hub and spoke model with all the colleges across London who deliver construction. But London is a city that's constantly being rebuilt.
Yeah.
And FE is providing the skills for that. It's just disappointing that we don't see the investment in the sector to enable us to do that better. So I got a bit of the sort of gem of that happening all those years ago when I saw, you often don't know what your organisation does when you join it, do you? That colleges can do that too.
Yes.
But it's always been a big part of my career, is to see what we can do for every section of our community.
Yes. You would hope it's high up on somebody's agenda because you're seeing the decline in jobs in hospitality and retail. Those people are all going to need a sort of refocus in terms of professional life.
I think one of the things that we don't do is quite a sort of a hobby horse of mine really is, I don't think we make it clear enough, sort of like a mission statement for FE as a country.
Yeah.
And I think that other countries do that better. Other countries are much clearer about what's public investment, what's private investment, what does the student pay for. That piece is a terrible mess for us. You try and explain it to I did an experiment it was a very simple experiment. I said, explain how NHS funding works from a consumer point of view. And they said, well, it's free to point delivery. So what do you need to know? Nothing. Now explain how it works for FE. And this is the sector they work in. Right? Well, give me a week. We've got to simplify it. We've got to make it easier for people to understand. But that comes from a mission to say, look, we believe in apprenticeships. Therefore, we will fund them in this way that's transparent and easy. And I think the reform of the levy is an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
But I think we keep sort of fluffing our lines on it nationally, really. And it makes it really hard for employers to engage with it. And I think we switch employers off because they say, I can get my skilled people in different ways. And I think we also then disadvantage students and so on. It's too difficult for me to access this. So I think if we sort of almost sort of rebase that and say, what do we need to say and to set out our stall as a country to say, we believe that, certainly everything up to level 2, we're just going to be fully funded. Wherever you're social, wherever you come from, whatever you do, the nation's going to pay for that. And I know that's a challenge because there's so many calls on the public purse, but it wouldn't all simplify. I think simplicity is a key. I think one of the real things that we do really badly in this country is we overcomplicate things. And it doesn't help the market. So your example of hospitality, if people knew I can always know there's going to be a consistent pipeline of people, and I know where to go. And I think colleges are good at that, but they then want to see, there's a nice sort of way into doing that with my employer. They'll pick up these skills, the college should do these skills, and they can see that sort of works for them as a career path. I think that those are the sorts of things, and we should do that for each industry. I think Skills England should start to do that.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet.
No. I think it would help if nationally we had a focus, a 10-year goal that we were cross-party building to, because then you can fill in the
requisite steps.
I think the cross-party thing is hugely important actually,
Yeah.
because again, it's. I think many other countries, particularly in Europe, education is less politicised than what I can see, and I think that education is incredibly politicised in the UK, which means you have lots of policy change.
Yeah.
One of the things I go through with our junior managers, we do some in-house stuff, and one of it is on just some of the key things that have happened to FE in the last 30 years. And you can go back and you look at the Kennedy report, or you look at the Moser report, or you look at the Leeds report, and you say each of these almost like a sort of a sharp turn for what we are wanting colleges to be. And you think, well, how would you have responded to that? Because you think, right, we know what's demanded of us. You go back to Kennedy, it's about widening participation. Okay, that's great. 2 years later, it's about something else. And then and there has to be much more a second view where we sort of leave it. We'll wait for the next white paper.
Yeah.
But we're always waiting for a white paper.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you just think, you know what, it's not perfect, we're going to leave it. So I think setting out some of the, well, you said, some of the bold parameters of what the FE should be, but not micromanaging it right down to all of the outputs that we expect to see from a sector. Because I think we've grown up hugely. And I think that's also a thing that disappoints me, is that we still don't seem to have that trust. And we don't regulate universities in that way, do we?
No.
There's much of a framework in which they can operate, whereas it's frameworks, controls, returns, data sets, and it's when you're boxed in.
Yeah.
And I think that's again a sort of, I think we're very good at adapting to it, but perhaps we shouldn't have to with such frequency, I think.
Right, let's go back again.
Okay.
So you establish yourself teaching FE, and I know that this dream or desire to become a leader within the sector was a key aspect for you, but it wasn't a straight line in terms of that first role.
It was a big disaster, really. It's the only way I could. Yeah. So my role that I have now was the 14th. If I was a candidate for you, you would have got rid of me, because you've been unsuccessful so many times. Go and talk to another agent. Which was, once I was told, you can see what I'm wearing today, once I was told by a recruiter, wear a white shirt next time. And I thought, you've run out of things to say to me. You'll say what shirt colour I need. Because I'd like to say I learned something from all of them. I did learn a few things. First of all, don't be completely honest with the board. No, of course I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that at all. But it's quite hard when a board are asking you to criticise their strategy. If you tell them you don't agree with a couple of chunky bits of it, that can be quite difficult. So I think, no, that's not right. Look, it was a lot of interviews, a lot of practice. A lot of, coming second to internal candidates, and I think I decided the 14th was going to be my last one, so it was just as well, really, that I got appointed. But I think that it would have been, in a sense, it would have been easy to give up, but also I think it was, I always felt there was something I could do at that next level, and I enjoy. Some people, absolutely hate change. Other people quite like change. If that change is productive and informative and it takes an organisation forward, and you take your people and your community with you, I think there's a job to be done. So, and if there is a fit, then this was the right fit for me. So, it was Dan, it was definitely not a straight line to this role.
But it's quite some persistence, isn't it, to keep going?
Or obstinacy, or just refusing to hear it, or sort of, I think my dad was thinking, I think that's enough now, son. I've been to leave something else. But.
Wow. But how did that sort of process of 14 applications, 13 rejected or not quite there, did that change how you took on that 14th role, the one you got?
Yes, in the sense that I think one of the things you get is you suddenly know a lot about what I think boards are looking for at that senior role, because you've been through so many processes. You also get to know a lot of colleges, because you'll get shared information on those stuff. So I probably had quite a bit of exposure through an interesting route of doing that. You've got a lot of time standing up in front of people. So there's a whole set of skills that maybe you've acquired through that process. and also about being, resilient or belligerent, depending in which sort of box you want to put it. But yes, I think it also meant for me that you need to understand that your version of FE that you learnt in the colleges you worked for is just your version of FE. And there's some commonality which applies to our whole sector, but FE is, like any school would be, or any organisation is local. Mm. And certainly most of the jobs I looked for have been in the Midlands, and then when I came to London, I thought, oh, this is different. This is a different set of challenges, different set of opportunities. I remember being desperately green in Cornwall where people were talking about migration, and I thought, crikey, well, this is an interesting thing. And then into the next door borough, and I thought you've got a lot to learn here. They're talking about going from Tower Hamlets to Hackney, and I thought, okay, that's not what I thought migration was. But it was that sort of, got to keep people crossing the border. I thought they went to France. So it was just, you've got to learn, haven't you? And I think I think what that prompts is a need for humility, isn't it? To say, look, you don't come into an organisation thinking you know everything about their context, because you definitely don't.
Yeah.
But look, I was having gone through that experience of coming second to the incumbent many times. I was the incumbent. I was the internal candidate then, and it worked for me. So.
This episode is brought to you by Morgan Hunt, a public sector recruitment agency with over 30 years of experience. Whether you're looking for your next role or growing your team, we match purpose-driven people with organisations making a real difference. Visit morganhunt.com to find out how Morgan Hunt inspires working lives.
Got it, okay. And was there an element of, right, I'm going to bloody show him now?
Of course there was.
Yeah.
Of course there was, yeah. But it was the right time, I think. Yeah.
Got it, okay. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
And it starts off as one college, and now we're looking at the whole group now, and all the colleges that are involved in it. How did that happen? How did they all fall into line?
Gosh, okay. Oh, interesting story. So I think Tower Hamlets was an interesting case. It was a college that was improving quite rapidly, and a college that was doing well in its community, and a college that was growing in respect. So we'd had a bit of an issue in the past, long before most of the team that I work with now have been there, but it was a legacy thing, as often those things are the way you're perceived. So we did quite a lot of work and got it to be better. But at the same time, there was a huge rush for schools to open sixth forms. And so we saw our numbers just getting sliced off every year, which was very frustrating when your Ofsted grade's improving, your numbers are going down. But that is the nature of, there were 16 schools in Tower Hamlets when I started, 3 had sixth forms, 5 years later, 13 had sixth forms. So you're just getting numbers sliced off all the time. So we started to think that we're small but perhaps not perfectly formed because we're vulnerable. And so at the same time, and often these things come by chance conversation sometimes, we then had the area review process. So that set a policy sort of environment that was helpful to us to have those conversations. And then we spoke to the principal of Hackney. He said, look, things are a bit difficult for us as well. We've got similar challenges, a few more on the finance side, which we didn't have. And so that was the first merger we did in 2016. And I think what we learned from that merger was the need to really take staff with you. Because there was a lot of, what are we doing this for? Because as a leader, one of your jobs is you tell people a little bit about some of the things, your challenges. You don't tell them every challenge you've got. There's that sort of umbrella thing, isn't there? You've got to protect your people to some extent. You're not going out and telling them every single, God, you've got to believe what we've got to deal with today. Well, that's your job, isn't it, to deal with that stuff? So you've got to we didn't realise that there were some of those challenges. So you gently do that. And we did that. We took over a whole day staff development. We just went through the rationale, the environment, what we thought it would look like. And we gave a huge amount of opportunity for staff to engage with us around it. And I think not everyone was on board, but I think they respected the fact that we'd taken that time. That it wasn't just a fait accompli, it was something they could actually engage with. And so I think that sort of set out the way we wanted to do it. But I think as we sort of realised that there was going to be some more opportunities, then quite rapidly we looked at Redbridge in 17. And again, a really quite a sound college, but a couple of missteps around its HE strategy had left it a bit vulnerable. And so we started to engage with them. And I thought at this point, there was a really important decision that we made as a senior team, which is, what is the model that we want to use to run this college? And what I would say is, it's a model that works for us. And our model was, we decided to put a matrix structure in place. And sometimes matrix structures are, and I knew at the time it was a risk. And I thought, this is either going to be a key component of our success, or it's going to be my resignation letter in about a year's time, and I wouldn't be here probably with you. And for us, it has worked. So our matrix structure means that I've got a very, very talented group of principals who report to me, and they manage what would have been 2 legacy colleges each, so Tower Hamlets and Hackney, but they also manage curriculum across the whole group, which means that you are breaking down silos almost from day one. You're forcing people to work across the whole organisation, but they also still own their community and their campus, and that's important to them. So I thought, if we're going to keep doing this, which we sort of did, you've got to have a structure that enables you to do that. Otherwise, it's just a sort of a collection of colleges. Now, for some organisations, that might be their model, that'll be fine. Some of it's about geography, because we ought to be quite geographically contained too. So then when we were looking at Redbridge and Epping, Epping was in a different situation because it was an intervention at a grade 4 at Ofsted, and I think, again, that sort of led us on to the next key thing, which was about culture. Mm-hmm. And I think the key thing culture is huge, isn't it? And it's talked about all the time. And I think for us, we didn't want culture just to be a mission statement or a set of written down values. It needed to be something that was lived. And a former colleague, very sadly no longer with us, had a great phrase we used, which is, put yourself in the heart of the problem. And so what we did is, all the senior managers who can teach. And her subject was early years. She said, well, early is a bit of it's not doing as well as it should be. So she jumped straight into the department and sort of works with them. I'm on your teaching team, I'm going to work with you, I'm going to sort of tackle this. And I think that what people felt was, this isn't just a set of managers saying, go and fix that. A set of managers will work with you to fix things. And I think what you're then trying to do is say, people come to work to do a good job. People come to work to feel valued, and people come to work to, if you're an FE, you come to work to improve the lives of the students you work with. You give them a bit of that back, and they'll work with you. And that's what we had. And I think, for all sorts of reasons, Epping had lost its way. The next year after merger was the most improved. I had a brilliant principal who just, no, this is on my watch now, we're going to do it. And we turned it around quite quickly. Because actually, sometimes it's not rocket science sometimes. It's shore up the basics, get people to believe in what they're doing, and then communicate that to your community. And the turnaround we've had in numbers, which was, it is the last place on earth I will go to I want to get in there, and queuing outside on day one. We've had that in at least 4 of our campuses, people queuing. Wow. A rain for construction, they were queuing at 7:30 in the morning, which I thought was quite impressive. I think if you can show people that the work that they have has an impact, you share that data with them, you're halfway there, I think. It's never easy. It's never easy and bring an organisation together. There was a whole Essex thing, but now you're in Essex. And that's a different place to London. And you sort of, okay, but we understand that, and we'll work with the community, we'll understand that. And then it was Havering, the 2 colleges merged in Havering. Don't do 2 mergers on the same day. 2 lessons, don't do a merger in the middle of the year, because your finance team will never forgive you. Yeah. And they're still talking about it now. Don't do it in April again, the whole years first of all. And then we did 2 mergers in 18, which was both the Havering colleges. What I think was great about that, I'll give him a name check. This was Paul Wakeling, who was principal of Havering Sixth Form College. They weren't trying to fix the problem. There was no problem to fix. Because it was a sound college. But what Paul said to me was, it doesn't make any sense for you to not have the 2 Haverings working as a unit, because actually we're non-competitive, complementary curriculum. We need to do this together. So he actually said, could we come into this? That's quite a rare strategic move, actually. So it was a big deal to do two mergers at the same time. And I think there was also an issue then about a perceived cultural difference with the sixth form, which you can't ignore it, but it was overstated. I mean, the first 7 years of my career were in a sixth form college, and I think it was this thing, well, Effie's like the brash cousin that sort of, a bit flash and sort of, and we're the serious academic. And he said, yeah, but actually, we're all working with young people, aren't we? And now that is a complete non-issue, but it was a bit of an issue at the time, and I think you just have to acknowledge it and work with staff on it to say, we've created this artificial divide in our sector that doesn't need to exist. We just have different parts of the market and we can work together on those. So I think that was what you're trying to do, I think, because all of that happened within a space of 2 or 3 years, is you need a few key things to make it work. One is stick to that structure to say, look, because then the structure enables you to scale it. Have a really good team. I've got a phenomenal team who have to show a lot of resilience to go through that. But also it does get easier when you do more, because you say, yeah, but we've seen that problem before and we know how to fix that. And actually you can convey that to staff to say, look, be honest with people. We found that wasn't, for understandable reason, that wasn't always the case. So we can talk to people and say, look, actually we know your college really well now. There isn't really an issue with quality, but there was an issue with finance, and most of that's gone away. So now we can work on that journey together. Yeah, and then you start to pick up the projects that people thought would never happen. So Havering had a sort of a half, they'd done about half of what they wanted to do at Raynham, which is our construction centre, but they haven't had the money for the new build. That's now funded, finished, and we're looking at a third build there. That site also needed a refurb. We just got planning permission for that. So I think you sort of talk to people about what was not done that you would like to have seen. So I think that was quite a lot of the work that we put in place. And then our last merger, which is still quite early, was a year ago, when we merged with B6, renamed it Hackney, sixth form. I think the issue for them is a really difficult market, actually. Very, very, very competitive market for 16 to 18, and really quite a sort of an oversupply of places. And I think that was a college which had done its absolute best to hold on to a market that's moving away from it. So then there's a need to refocus the curriculum and to work with people on that. So yeah, we're not rushing to do any more. It's probably your next question.
What's next?
A rest, I think.
Yeah.
No, our team have said they will kill me if we do any more, which I think is probably fair. And I think, and again, you might be coming on to this, but I think that the process we went through in Ofsted, Janet Smith, who was our nominee, phenomenal job. But I think what was important is because we are not a multi-academy trust who have their own schools still get Ofsted individually, one Ofsted great for the whole organisation. And for a whole organisation that's gone through that many mergers to get to outstanding, I think the sector has a love-hate relationship with Ofsted, really. There's lots of issues with the process. I mean, I saw the pressure it put on the staff. However much you want to take that pressure away from people, it's very hard to do that. And we had a fair team. We had a team who were evidence-based and judged it really, really well. But still, it's a huge thing. And it's a moment in time. So I think that there is a lot of work that we need to do about getting a system that doesn't put that pressure on people. But the lifted people were not walking on the ground for about a month after we got that. It just, the validation it gave to people of almost their entire career, actually. Now, it shouldn't have that weight, because actually I kept saying to people, the most important judge of what we do is our students. But it's still a good thing to have. And I think that really what you're trying to do when you go through that many mergers is you're about consistency. And that's what Ofsted is saying, we saw consistency. And you're thinking, tick, yeah. But yeah, hard one.
Got it. So through that whole process, and you talked about the importance of culture, but was that driving for that outstanding part of that process, or was it just a happy byproduct of the job you were doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was always an aspiration, but not for the sake of it. Not for the sake of it. So I think what we said, you'd like the validation, you'd like the badge, but at the end of the day, would I rather have, happier students who progressed into good jobs, who progressed to the university, progressed to the next stage? That always has to be more important. And so, we focus, and I think there's other things, we focus on very few metrics. We have a balanced scorecard type of approach, but it doesn't have 57 things in it. It's a much more simplistic thing, and we share that a lot with people to say, look, this is your data, what it's saying. Very clean data as well, by the way, which is very important to us. And so what we were saying was, we can see how we judge ourselves, and we're quite tough on ourselves. So I think those were probably it. But it was, when we started our merger journey, it wasn't, oh, and by the way, the outcome of this was we get an outstanding institution. It will be, if we do the right things, then that could be the result.
Yeah. In a lot of the terminology you're using, I can see that business studies background coming through, and then the private sector probably experience you had at the very start of your career. Is that fair? Is that
no, it's completely fair. I still feel the pain of being reclassified into the public sector, which does not sit with me at all. No, it's helped. It's up. I mean, these are really hard jobs, and I think that it has always helped me to have a bit of a business background.
Yeah.
So I've got, I've always worked with really great, CFO type roles, deputy CEO roles. But we expect a lot from senior people, and I think that sometimes the system it's a system which is quite easy to trip over, because you expect people to be deeply rooted in pedagogy and education, but also to understand something about how financial organisations work, because you're accountable for that. But having said that, I think we've done a good job on that. We inherited quite a lot of debt through merger, all paid off. Although I still like the flexibility to borrow. I think that's a crazy. That's what one of the things that annoys me is that, well, you're just a big school. Well, clearly not. I mean, our property portfolio is probably worth $250 million. And probably needs another $250 million to invest in it, by the way. But I think for me, it's been very helpful to have had a business background. In an environment where funding is tight, where you're making big capital investment decisions, when you're going through a whole series of challenges, to have both of those things been helpful for me.
Got it, okay. And that probably leads me on to my next question, which is around challenge.
Yeah.
And I guess there's multiple challenges that are hitting you on a daily basis, and they're probably not getting any easier in terms of how you manage that. Is there a framework, is there advice you could give about how you deal with those situations of deep challenge? Yeah,
well, for what it's worth, I think one of the key things is to understand whether this is how deep rooted is the problem. So one of the things we're quite good at is trying to understand whether this is this just an operational thing? And we've got a business improvement unit within the college. Lots of universities do, colleges don't. So we say, okay, that's been a constant problem. We're going to put some people on that, but we can fix that ourselves. So much more transactional type of problem. But still important, because often organisations fall down because they're not executing their plan. That's the execution bit. Can we deliver on what you said? And if we've got barriers internally, we just went over 10,000 young people enrolled this enrolment period. Almost no, I probably jinxed it now, haven't I? Almost no system issues. So you get a whole system approach to stuff like that. But I think they're trying to say, no, this is a different level of problem. This requires either a whole organisational approach, or it requires us to go outside and start to have a different approach around lobbying, influence. And when you're a big college, you can do a lot more influencing, and that's been really, really helpful. So I think that, understand the scale of the problem and understand what is the thing we're really trying to fix. And sometimes spending longer on the definition of the problem is an important factor that we overlook. We say, well, the answer is this. But not like we say to people, don't tell what the answer is, describe the problem better. Because sometimes we're jumping to try and say, but the answer is this, we haven't really flushed out the whole problem, have you, here? let's try and really all get on the same page to understand what the root cause is. It's my business bit, not but and I think that will help, and I think we've done some of that. So yesterday I was on a really good call with some colleagues from the AOC who were very good, to expect a really good relationship with, about what might happen in the SEND space. Lots of discussion about whether the education, health and care plan system might change. So the macro problem for us is we don't want FE to be an afterthought to a system that's changed to work for parents and schools, which it has to, and there's, and this is what, so FE pick it up, rather than saying, let's get FE colleagues involved in designing that system so it can work better. So I think, trying to really understand what is it you're trying to do, which dial do you want to shift, what does it look like afterwards, I think is a key sort of discipline about the way you should approach problems.
That's really good advice, because I think often when the problem arises, this kind of assumption, isn't there, about what the problem is, and don't worry.
Well, if you define the answer that quickly, the question is, why didn't you do it then?
Yeah. Great. Okay, and then final question from me. We talked about those 14 applications.
Yeah.
If somebody is in their sort of mid-30s, late 30s, sitting in a college somewhere, and feeling unloved and can't quite see where it's going for them, what would you say to them now? What advice would you give them if they have aspiration of leadership?
Well, I hope they don't feel too unloved, because it's quite that's a lonely place to be. I think actually have why you want to do it. I think it's really important. But also one of the things I felt is really important, and it sort of helped me, is in your current role, seek out things that are outside of your current role definition, and say, look, is there some projects I can get involved in? Are there some bits where I can show you a little bit more? Because even if it's not for that employer, it's for someone else, isn't it? So I think that will test you. We've jumped into all sorts of things where we don't really know what we're doing. But you've got to learn on it and say, actually, we all did that earlier in our careers. We all did stuff where we only need 20% of what that job or that task involved. And I think that's and the learning you get from that's huge. And I think in that sense, you'll need a little bit of a sponsor, not somebody you're going to pester all the time. Because it's not about contacts, it's about the quality of the opportunity that contact will give you. And I think that's really important. I'd also say look outside all the time. We always spend some time in our scenes, we talk about non-FE stuff, like what's going on in the world. Because if you're taking a broader interest, we could get very bubbly in our sectors, can't we? And just say, oh look, I'm looking at. So yeah, but what's AI mean for us? How's that going to impact us? What's it looking like in terms of where the economy is going? What if there's a significant government change next election? What do those things mean? So, because I think if you're thinking more broadly, then that will help you think more deeply about the sort of career you want to have. I think I'd also think about, and it's quite a specific thing, it's a specific thing that I've seen quite a lot of staff, senior staff, who said, I just love the curriculum stuff. But for me, it's okay to get to that, probably not a number 2 position, and I'm happy with that, because I don't really fancy doing the finance and the HR and all the other bits. And other people said, I really want that strategy piece. And in that case, then identify the bits where you need to develop a bit more. Until I came to London, I was much weaker on capital and estates and those sorts of things. Expose yourself to it. So if you want to aspire to that more senior level, understand your own weaknesses, honestly. So how do I get some exposure to the bits that I'm not so clear about? Would be some of the advice I would give.
So you talked about scorecarding earlier. Yeah. You're talking about balanced scorecarding.
Sort of, yeah. I think so.
And people naturally have a strength in there, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's getting the balance. Yeah.
What I would also say is, ask yourself some questions about the sort of leader you want to be, or the leader you are already within your current role, and how you see that helping you or not helping you, and do you need to shift in that sort of approach you have to leadership. One of the things that we see, because we promote a lot of people internally, and we talk to them about the transition from being relatively transactional based when you're a junior manager, so I need that done, and we've got to fix that, and that's the problem today, to be much more strategic and outlook and say, what are we trying to achieve over a much broader timeline? Where do we want our department to be in 2 or 3 years' time? And that's a hard transition. And trying to give yourself a bit of exposure to that thinking about what does that type of approach to leadership look like, because it's probably a little bit different to the approach you may have now.
Brilliant. Gerry, thank you for sharing this wonderful story. I hate to talk about 14 applications. I think it's a recruiter in me. But to go through that and then be...
Should have come to you, shouldn't I?
Exactly, we would have got you
That's why I went wrong. Yeah.
But to actually have this story now about the bringing together of those colleges, and then, whilst I hate to dwell on the Ofsted, it is a fantastic achievement.
Oh, dwell on it as much as you like.
Okay, we will do.
Yeah.
But obviously, there are thousands and thousands of lives that are changed in that process as well, who don't appear on the Ofsted certificate as such.
Oh, it's true.
But possibly they're more important in some ways.
Possibly they are.
Yeah. But it's a wonderful job, and thank you so much for spending your time with us this morning.
Thank you, enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast, driving positive change and helping you to grow your career. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring conversation. For more insights, opportunities, and updates, head to morganhunt.com.